Well, thank you guys for joining me. I'm Jamie, and thank you for joining me for this week's of tips and tricks. We are going to talk about assessment and recruiting um, product with SymTrain. So this is really, really an exciting one, and I even dressed for the occasion because I'll be honest with you, when you are assessing candidates for a job, when you are recruiting for filling a role, this is generally what you see, right? You see someone generally at some point, probably over a Teams meeting, and they look pretty good, right? I look pretty nice, I look professional. Um, and I'm making a pretty good first impression. And that's important, but really being able to get people into a role and making sure that it's the right fit for them, that it's something they actually want to do, even though they said 1,000 times that, oh, yes, this sounds like a great role for me. We don't know until we actually get them in there, learning more about that role and doing some of the things that that role consists of. So it's much, much more than just how they look on a Teams meeting for that. So I'm going to go through this, and throughout I will stop and pause and let you ask some questions if you have them. Please feel free to put any questions that you might have into chat as well if you'd rather go that route. And hopefully we'll have a few minutes at the end so we can kind of wrap up and ask them for some questions. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay, so I want to just kind of start out by saying that, this is such a great product to use for assessing candidates. I know this very much firsthand because I've used it. And I will share some of the statistics that I got by going from nothing or traditional assessment to what I call sim assessment. I created a new word. So I want you guys to leave this session with a few things. So what we're trying to solve by using sim assessment in your recruiting and assessment efforts of candidates, how can this help? And lastly, just, at the end, we're going to talk about best practices. Why are they best practices? And some kind of stats that I've seen personally by using sim assessment in vetting candidates and going through that interview process. So, all right, so let's go. So first off, red flags. Why is, what we're trying to solve for is really just trying to get beyond the red flags that we get when we immediately get someone hired, right? New hire. I've got a few things here I just want to read through. How many times have you had a new hire start with your organization, and maybe they're in their first day with the group, and they do not seem at all interested in being there. They're not engaging. They seem distracted. Maybe they're even have their phone kind of like they're looking at it. Or maybe, after going through the interview process, part of that process is saying, what kind of proficiency level are you with a certain tool, because in that role they have to be at a certain level, like Outlook or just really simple tools, but yet they get into the new hire orientation and suddenly they don't have any proficiency level at all. Do some of those things sound familiar to you? And I want to kind of pause here and I want to ask, what are some of the red flags that you see with a new candidate that is in new hire class that went through all of the new hire process? What are some of the red flags that you see that you would like to really eliminate? Anyone want to share something? Let's kind of continue on by saying, obviously traditional interviews in getting the right person in the right role is a very time consuming effort, right? It takes a lot of time and it costs a lot of money. So, a bad hire can cost up to 30% of the employee's first year earnings. Average cost to hire someone anywhere from 40 to 20K. It takes about 6 months or more for a business to break even with a new hire. All stats that I'm sure that you have heard and that you're aware of. But this is staggering, right? We have to do better. And it's a huge expense and a huge pull on all of the different people who are part of that process. So getting more information from absolutely the very first interaction you have with that new candidate can be a game changer. And so I want to start by just saying, those pre-interview times, how many times when someone's, does someone start and quit in the same day or week because the role was not what they thought it was, even though they were explained the role multiple times and they were very much, oh yes, this is exactly what I understand it. I can do this role. I was talking to a client last week and they said that they get that all the time. Um, so the fact of the matter is that until someone actually does something, they really do not and will not kind of commit to the fact that this is not something that they want to do. They have a perception of what they think it is, or they really just need that job. And until they get in there actually doing it, they're not going to admit that, okay, this isn't what I want to do, or I can't do this. So that's where SymTrain comes in. Sim assessment, being able to learn things about candidates that most often they just go unnoticed in a traditional interview. You all know, you use SymTrain. It's all about learning by doing. So we can learn about the candidates that we bring on board to be hired for a particular role, and by having them do some of the things in the role and really vet them through that. So, being able to, and this is where we kind of go in, how does SymTrain help? How does sim assessment really help in hiring candidates? So rounds of interviews. So creating sim exercises that really allow you to identify. So imagine in a round one where you would traditionally have them learn about the company a little bit or have them tell you about what they know about the company. And then we fill them in on everything that they might want to know about the company. And then a little bit about the role that they'll be doing and how we explain how to do it. So imagine having them, not omitting that completely, but allowing them to hear about it, but then say, here, this simulation will give you even more in depth of what the company is so that you can gauge whether this would be a good fit for you as in terms of being part of this organization. And then after you complete that, you're going to be able to go in here and do a simulation of an exercise that you will do every single day in this role so that you really have a clear understanding of what this role consists of. And imagine, again, being able to integrate this in. So much like what you do when you integrate SymTrain into your onboarding, into your coaching, look at your interview process and say, okay, this is where I can reinforce to ensure that this candidate is right for this role. So round two, more of a general assessment for the role. So are they a fit for this role day in and day out? How many times in an interview process is part of that process sitting with someone doing that job and watching them do it? I know I've done this myself, but that's a very common thing to do, to have people sit next to someone the day to learn kind of the day in the life, day in and day out of the role. A lot of times when you do that, it's a little bit disruptive to the person that they're sitting with, because even though they're sitting behind them and just watching, most likely they are explaining what they're doing, right? So a little bit disruptive to the person in the role. Sometimes I've actually seen people sitting behind there, they're looking around, they're not paying attention, they're not really watching what that day in the life is. So imagine being able to create a few sims that allows them to see this is the day in the life of this role, and being able to have parts of that where they actually execute it. So they really feel and know what it would be like to be in that role. And then third, maybe being able to really dive in a little bit deeper on what the competencies, whether verbal or process, are in the role. So you can really have a clear understanding on, do they speak the way that it would be necessary? Are they confident? Can they do basics of some of these things so that I don't have to worry that they'll start on day one and not know how to work Outlook, right? All that kind of competency things that are really nice to have. Again, it really allows the candidate to feel and be able to be honest with themselves, whether this is something that they want to do. And it allows you as the interviewer to be able to be sure that you're getting a strong candidate so that you will get someone who will stick. It also allows in these rounds of interviews, sometimes there are multiple departments that are involved in interviewing. You could actually create, I kind of envision a great idea is to create training plans. So our newest feature, and I'm going to show that to you because I actually created training plans for a couple of sims that I'm going to show you. And but actually being able to have each of the departments create and create some of the process they do in SymTrain so that they again are the consistency with what happens from department to department is very much the same and gives that candidate the best possible view of the position and gives the interviewer the best possible view of how are they going to be a fit? Are they going to be a good fit, a great fit, or not a fit, right? Any questions so far? All right, so sim assessment, I think it really helps you identify what is missed in a traditional interview. And some of the things that I've noticed with using sims in recruitment and kind of vetting candidates is that you really get to see how they do things. So did they do what you asked them to do? So if you're asking them to complete a simulation, it's part of the interview process. Did they do what was asked? Did they follow the directions of what you gave them and how to execute the simulations? That right there can tell you a lot. Did they complete it on time? Part of an interview process is completing this. Did they complete it? Again, you can create a training plan and actually give a due date to it. Did they follow up and let you know that they completed it, especially if you ask them to? Some of those things we tend to let slide, but they're very important red flags to whether a candidate is going to be a good candidate. Were they able to do the tasks assigned? Did they sound confident in speaking? Did they respond? Did the responses align with the company and the role? Something that, again, it's hard to gauge. Sometimes you get them talking, but sometimes in traditional interviews, there can be those staged answers. There's lots of books out there. And could they be a fit for another role in the company that maybe they didn't even apply for, but that, I don't know if they're going to be a fit for here, but possibly here. So you can actually get more out of each person that you bring in, especially if you have openings throughout the organization. So sim assessment really can identify a lot of things. And then, best practices. Look for, like I said before, look for your current assessment recruiting process and create sims to accomplish and reinforce what you need to know about these candidates. And really kind of look at it and integrate it everywhere you can so that you have an extra set of eyes, an extra tool that gives you the knowledge that you need to be able to make a good decision. Every department can create their own curriculum, like I said, within training plans, especially where you can set the different metrics. So each training plan for each department, you can set that they have to achieve a certain score. There could be a baseline that you have or that you determine. If they can't get at least 50%, then they they're not at the right competency level. We know that immediately, right? A lot of that can be done within training plans. Each department can create them with their own metrics to really help determine a fit. Being able to pull up reporting and creating users, maybe you do candidate X, candidate Y, right? And create these generic users so that who is, who you're interviewing, and then you'll be able to go on quickly in reporting and really see how they did really quickly. And then this also gives you the ability to keep track even year by year, because sometimes I'm sure a lot of you have had the same thing, but when I've been interviewing before, I always thought, gosh, that name sounds really familiar. And and then I'm like, and then I'll have to go back and look and try to find, and like, oh yeah, they interviewed last year, but they never did this, or they didn't follow up here. Or, I didn't have that, and maybe I give them another chance. In SymTrain, you can actually deactivate the candidates. And when you deactivate them versus deleting them, you always have a record. So you know exactly who you interviewed and how far they got in the process. So I'm going to pause right here and let you guys ask some questions if you have them. Any questions at all so far? Is there anyone on the call who's using Sim assessment right now to assess candidates? Awfully quiet. I'll take that as a no, but that's good. It really is something to really think about. So I wanted to kind of, I've created a couple of sims that I want to show you as examples. But before I do that, I wanted to kind of share some actual results that I've seen that can happen by using SymTrain in recruiting and assessment. So in a prior role that I had, I did a lot of interviewing. It was for a particular type of role, so certainly we knew going in it wasn't for everyone. And we had anywhere from 25 to 100%, from a new hire class. We might lose one person, we might have lost every person. And that was an ongoing process of really, and it was disheartening because you do all of that prep work, trying to get the right person in the role, you get them hired, and then you lose all of them. And then you really you're behind the eight ball, right? Because you're short people. By integrating SymTrain and using this in not only kind of pre-assessment, is this really going to be a fit for them? Do they really understand what this role is? Are they going to be a fit for the organization? And then really getting specific on, this is exactly what this role is. This is what you will do every day. We went from 25 to 100% quit to 100% retention. I mean, it was unbelievable because they felt really prepared. And even in surveying these candidates and saying, how did you feel about the interview process? They were like, I loved having the simulations. I loved being able to really learn what this job was, because I knew exactly what I was getting into. So that's some of the things that I have found out from there. Any questions while I kind of convert here into SymTrain? Oh, I was going to show here. Nothing? All right. So I told you guys that I'm going to, oh yeah.
Sorry, Jamie.
No, go ahead.
This might be a silly question, but I'm just trying to get a picture of how this would actually work. So, like, let's say the potential interviewee fills out a application. When do we give them access to SymTrain, and what does that look like?
So you can give them access, immediately and say, this is part of our interview process, just making sure that you know about our organization and the role that you're applying for. You could actually give them access right then after they've completed, after you've gotten your application and saw, okay, this is definitely someone that we would, seems good, we can go forward. You could do it right then and there. And just say, hey, this is a tool that we not only use in our interview process, but it's a tool we use every day as a training tool, as a coaching tool, reinforcement. So we utilize this to give our candidates the best possible overview of everything that they might be wondering about the company or about the role that you're applying for. So I think you can do it in tandem to reinforce. So that's why I say you kind of look at your kind of path that you usually do for interviewing and what that whole process looks like, and where can you integrate SymTrain to reinforce what you do, especially if you have people who often get to a certain point and then you lose them in the process, then that's a good place for reinforcement. But you can really do it at any level where you feel that just a little bit extra information, because everyone learns, we all know everyone learns differently. And this could actually maybe give a consistent message. And so things aren't missed. And so they do the SymTrain and then talking to you, you've really kind of covered all the bases. Did that answer your question, Ashley?
Yes, that does. So just to clarify, we would have to create a user for them with their email. And then just, did you usually explain the process through a phone call, or do you usually do it through email, or how does that work?
I usually did it by email. Because if it's written and it kind of does the step by step and giving really clear, we use the, kind of explaining, we use this tool. Here's the log. Here is what you will need is a computer with a working mic, right? And just give them the statistics. This is, you'll log in with this URL. Here's your username, and you could set like a set password if you wanted it to be just generic for them. And then you would explain the process. You're going to do 2 simulations. One of them you'll just navigate through. You don't have to say anything, just where it says next, press, click on it to proceed to the next. And then just kind of give basic information on how to navigate whatever the simulation is that you have, but just basic information. I'll tell you, that's a really good, that's a good way to do it, because again, if you have really simple instruction and they don't do it, and then I've even had an instance where it said, they called back and said, "Oh, I was wondering, if you had an update on my if where it stands." And you could say, "Well, I had sent you an email asking, we talked about me sending the email. You gave me your email address. I sent it, but you never completed the process." And a lot of times they say, "Oh, okay, yeah, I forgot about that." Right. And they didn't look at their email. So again, I always kind of preferred the email, but you could do it either way with that. But as long as it's clear direction, because you can learn a lot on how they execute it from there.
And just to add to that really quick, for the emails, this is something that you can do a template in advance, like Jamie's mentioning, and then you can use our deep link feature as well to integrate those specific sims and modules that you want them to complete. So if you want them to run through 2 different sims, you could have those deep links directly to those simulations embedded in that email that you're going to send out, and kind of just use it as a template there. So that's something that can help kind of streamline the experience too.
Any other questions? Ashley, you good?
Yes, thank you both so much. That was super helpful.
We
So
do
we
have
only
a
have-
question on
Okay,
the
go
chat,
ahead.
Jamie. Sorry. Okay, so Dan's asking, Jamie, can you share worst practices where customers used assessment poorly? For example, a 10-question interview as a first point of contact with the candidate.
So can you repeat the question again?
Of course. Can you share worst practices where customers used assessment poorly? For example, there is a 10-question interview as a first point of contact with the candidate.
Yes, so absolutely. So a lot of times when you are just asking certain questions, like I said before, assessment can be pretty general, right? There are certain answers that obviously people know that they just choose an answer of the least path of resistance. Having them answer, yes, I have a certain proficiency with this. again, there's a lot of books that kind of dictate people. Some people can interview better than others. So utilizing SymTrain to be able to have them actually show and talk in SymTrain and allowing them to express what they're asking for, those questions, because there's different ways, and I'm going to show you right now in SymTrain, there are different ways that you could actually execute a sim using Q&A, where you would have this in SymTrain. And I will tell you that by using this sort of sim within, the process, will allow you to get a better gauge of those questions because they don't really, again, they are answering them. They have one attempt in which to answer it. Here, I'm just going to kind of play a little bit of this and let you see how I've kind of set up this Q&A. And this is really just a question, and then they have to respond. And then you have a recording of it. But at the beginning of this sim, I've given them complete direction on what they need to do and how they progress through the sim. So again, it's a good way for them to be able to get some extra insights on this candidate.
And just from a recruiter perspective, just to kind of talk about, as you guys all know, we have the playbacks in here. And so when you're doing these types of sims and building in the back end, since we have the positive, but then also the negative keywords, as a recruiter, if I don't want to listen to the entire recording, you can just correlate that directly with their score and add those positive and negative kind of attributes to what the answers to those questions would be to really help you kind of streamline who you're going to move forward in your process is not. So that's something that not only makes it seamless for any of the applicants and candidates, but then from a recruiter perspective too, really helping them kind of, evolve and really see where their strong candidates are and not.
So in here, as you can see, it talks to them, it allows them to hear. Thank you for your interest in our company. The first step in our interview process is to get to know you and your experience a little better. In this simulation, there are a series of questions. Please respond to each question and press the space bar when you are done answering. Doing that will prompt the next question. The system will not let you go back to a previous question once answered. Complete this one time and please complete in one sitting. Thank you, and reach out to interview@email.com with any questions. What do you know about our company and why do you want to work here? So when you set it up, you set it up as this, and
What skills and strengths can
you
you
do
bring
it
to this
without
position?
showing. They just have a bubble with the 3 dots where they respond.
Can you tell me about your current job? Can you tell me about a time when you had a disagreement with a boss or colleague and how you handled the situation?
Obviously, you can make these.
Do you work best alone or in a team? And what do you like or dislike about that? Why are you leaving your current position?
You can kind of see where you just go through the questions, and they have actually they have a little coaching tip here that says, keep your response under 1 to 2 minutes. So you can be very specific and get some of those answers in there. Not that you wouldn't ask some of these questions in a real interview, but to be able to have a recorded response of what they came up with in terms of their responses here can be very telling. You can also hear the background noise. Do they have music blaring? I might have had that experience. So it really can tell you a little bit more. So it's not that you wouldn't ask some of these questions in an actual interview, but being able to go into that interview with this knowledge. And just to real quickly show you, in screen navigation, it's really important. You can actually put in here a screen navigation. For some reason, my system is slow. And you can actually see, how did they navigate the process here? Did they enter in the information? Did they do it within a reasonable amount of time? So again, you can really see whether they followed the directions and all of that. So having you to be able to give them a a simulation that shows that they have a certain proficiency with a certain system is great. In much better than saying, oh yeah, I'm a 5 or I'm a 4. I mean, because what does that really mean anyway? So any questions with that? I know we're right at time here. Any other questions? Plus, would I get some of those sims in your system? Absolutely, Ashley. I'll put both of them in your system, the two that I prepared. And if anyone else would like them, please just let us know. And we'll get them in there so you can take a look. So again, this is a great use. I mean, this product is just everything when it comes to being able to make sure that you're getting the best candidates in the roles that you have the first time. So just an additional tool to give you insight that you just normally maybe wouldn't get on that interview traditionally. So let us know if you have any further questions. We are definitely here to answer any of them. Would love to hear some of your feedback once you kind of try this. It is a game changer, I will tell you, because it really creates a consistency for a process that is so cost effective in time. It sucks the time out of the people all doing it, but yet and creates a consistency with the process so that you have a solid candidate that will stick. But thank you all so much for joining me today. Hopefully this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again on another tips and tricks, and let us know what we can do to help. We are very, very appreciative of your partnership.
Very helpful. Thank you so much, Jamie.
You're welcome. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of
too.
your week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie.
Jamie. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jamie.